a billionaire who can buy silence, and a pair of 6-year-olds who can shatter it like glass. Meet a woman who believes rules are only useful if they protect the smallest person in the room. This is the story of twins who destroyed every nanny until the one person who could read their storms appeared. Before we begin, please rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me why. Then lean in, because two tiny hurricanes are about to change the weather. The elevator hisses open on the 39th floor of Kestrel Tower, where air smells like polished success and apples that never bruised. A wall of glass keeps the city at arm's length, and the city pretends not to mind. Candidate 34, the receptionist says. Smile tight, eyes on a clipboard that looks like it has fired people before. You're late. Taya Moreno, coat thrifted, sneakers clean, hair in a knot that refuses to beg, doesn't flinch. She checks the time. I'm exactly on time, she answers, which is the kind of sentence poor people practice in mirrors in rich buildings try to untie. A bodyguard with a jaw like a vault opens a door marked privet. Somewhere beyond it, a laugh too carefree to be adult ricochets off marble. The twins. They have names that look good on invitations. Leo and Livia Wolf, 6 years old, eyes that stay on you like cameras that know your face won't survive the caption. Their father is Cassian Wolf, CEO of Kestrel Capital, a man the magazines photograph in black and white to make him look less like a rumor. He does not pose for today. Today he is late to his own crisis, because money can buy a lot, and punctuality is not one of its hobbies. Humiliation arrives as choreography. Taya steps into a room designed by someone who charges by the mood. A semicircle of businesslike women in expensive neutrals sit at a table the size of a sail. The head of household operations, Ms. Price, cheekbones like receipts, gestures at a chair just shy of comfortable. Your resume is unconventional, she says, letting unconventional do the job of unacceptable. Taya nods once. Pediatric respiratory aide at St. Magnus for 5 years. Night manager at a community center. 2 years caregiving for my grandmother. Last 6 months on a food delivery app because hospitals cut my hours. She doesn't mention the eviction notice living like a ghost on her fridge, or the way her brother's pharmacy calls her before dawn to ask whether money wants to be mercy today. The position demands discipline, Miss Price says. The twins have high spirits. Everyone in the room performs a tiny flinch at the euphemism. They've had 12 nannies this year, adds a younger woman, who looks like she was hired to millennial-proof the mansion. 13, corrects a houseman shuffling past with a tray of glasses, a bandage on his thumb. From the hallway, a crash like a chandelier, learning to regret itself. A second later, a small voice calls, experiment successful. A blur barrels into the room. Livia, hair a halo of rebellion, face marked with felt-tip stars. She stops dead when she sees the semicircle of women, lifts her chin like a queen in pajamas, and announces, "We don't like strangers." Behind her, Leo appears holding a clipboard upside down and a glass prism that throws rainbows up the executive walls. He wears a cape that used to be a $700 throw blanket. Are you made of no? Livia asks Taya, squinting. Or yes. Leo tilts the prism toward Taya's face, studies the light. She's made of maybe. He diagnoses. Maybe is suspicious. Miss Price claps twice. It's the kind of clap that makes people return to appropriate shapes. Children, she says sweetly, go to the playroom and review your indoor voices. Forgive me, Taya says, standing, but you asked me to interact with the kids. She kneels, not to supplicate, but to meet eyes. Hi, I'm Taya. I'm here to see if we fit. I don't take jobs I can't do. Livia narrows her eyes. Everyone says they can, she says. Then they cry, or they talk to us like we're goldfish that can hold forks. Leo lifts the prism again. What's in your pocket? He asks. A lemon drop, Taya answers. Honest as a pulse. It's for me. You can have half if you don't have allergies. Leo blinks. You're supposed to say no sugar and absolutely not. I'm supposed to say what I mean, Taya says. She breaks the candy clean with her thumbnail. Hands the bigger half to Livia. Do you share with your brother? Not when he lies, Livia says. I don't lie. You lied about the sprinkler. Livia fires back. Scientific truth evolves, Leo declares, and the room loses the will to pretend it isn't amused. Enough, Miss Price says. Steel under silk. The children have a schedule. She escorts the twins out with a smile that says hostage and a grip that says safe. When the door closes, she turns on Taya. That will be all, she says. We need candidates with training for these twins. Taya's mouth shifts into a smile she uses like a spare key. I have training. In smoke. In nights that won't end. In lungs that forget and need reminding. In grief that wears pajamas, she says softly. Not to humble, but to state inventory. Your references are community, Miss Price says, a word made tin in her mouth. We prefer agency. I prefer kids that get to breathe, Taya answers, and knows she just set herself on fire in a room that rewards ash. A man in a dark suit has been leaning against the opposite wall, face in a phone, the way power masquerades as boredom. He looks up at grief that wears pajamas, and Taya sees the magazine cover version of Cassian Wolf, jaw built by God on a deadline. Eyes like a bank freezing assets. Up close, he looks tired. Miss Moreno, he says, like he's confirming a rumor. He extends a hand that expects compliance, and gets a handshake that replies with a boundary. 5 minutes, he tells the panel. Alone, Miss Price performs surprise. Of course, she says, already planning a post-mortem. The office he leads her to has 2 kinds of books, those that get read and those that impress people who never open them. On the shelf, a photo freezes a woman with hair like summer and 2 babies chubby with future. She isn't here. The frame knows it. You lasted longer than most, Cassian says. 1 minute before offering candy. I didn't offer, Taya corrects. I traded. I'm teaching economics. He almost smiles. Why do you want this? He asks. But the question in his eyes is different. Why do you think you can? She answers the question he didn't ask. Because I'm good at losing and still showing up, she says. Because I'm not scared of loud. Because I will love them without making them responsible for my love. Because I won't try to fix your grief by pretending it isn't in the room. He stares, long enough to reveal hunger for a sentence that doesn't flatter and does not wait to be paid. He slides a file across the desk. This is a non-disclosure, he says. It is thick as a winter blanket. Understood, Taya says, skimming clauses that try to make breathing proprietary. He watches her eyes move. You have family. A little brother, she says. 20, asthma, plays trumpet, won't listen to his lungs or to me. I'm winning him on Tuesdays. She doesn't say that their mother cleaned hotel rooms until her hands became maps. That death took what it wanted and left the rent. That Taya learned to stretch money like dough until it became a crust that could hold a week. We have tutors, he says. We will have boundaries. Good, she returns. I have them too. Miss Moreno, Miss Price says, from the door, voice smooth and final. We'll be in touch. It is the human resources way of saying no with flair. Taya stands, shakes Cassian's hand, and almost escapes clean. The twins do not allow it. The playroom door bursts open and 2 small revolutionaries sprint down the hall with a white bedsheet between them like a pirate flag. On it in marker, no more nannies. Livia yells, surrender. Leo yells, diplomacy. The sheet catches under Taya's shoe. She leaps clean and catches the corner before anyone falls. The banner billows down like a defeated cloud. Livia glares. You're fast. I had brothers, Taya says. You said 1 brother, Leo corrects. Suspicious. Brothers, she repeats, swallowing the past. Some people are past tense. Security arrives with the choreography of men who have practiced being gentle. Miss Price hisses into an intercom. The twins are gathered, contained. Livia bares small teeth at a bodyguard and gets a smile for it. He has daughters. The banner is confiscated as evidence of something. Taya realizes she is still holding the corner of it. She lets go like she's releasing a prayer she is too practical to keep. "We'll be in touch, Miss," Price repeats, ushering Taya to the elevator. The doors close on the look on Cassian Wolf's face. A war between gratitude and habit. That habit is winning. Outside, the city is too bright to be kind. Taya counts bus stops and breaths. Her phone buzzes. The landlord, reminding her that noise complaints could accelerate transitions. She texts back a sentence Lemons would respect and opens a delivery app for a midday run. She carries hot noodles up 4 flights for a woman whose toddler calls everything yellow banana, and melts quietly in a hallway that smells like someone is trying. She files the Kestrel interview under. Wenton returns to her life. The call comes at dusk. A voice like invoices says, "Come back, you start now, trial day." Taya stares at the stove where rice pretends it will behave. "I don't have childcare," she says. "Bring him," the voice says, which is not mercy. It is pressure applied to a wage. She almost says no on principle, and then imagines the light bill folding its arms. "We'll be there," she says. And the we carries a boy who thinks marching bands should have asthma inhalers for snacks. Back at Kestrel, something has shifted. The apple smell is gone. The air smells like rain that can't decide. The twins sit on the carpet in the library, backs against each other like warriors at rest, a book of knots open between them. Miss Price hands Taya a laminated binder labeled Policy, in a font that thinks it's a personality. "No screens after 5. Gluten-free, unless cleared by nutrition. No physical affection beyond side hug without explicit invitation. No." Taya looks up. "I've got it," she says, and puts the binder down on the table like you said a baby. "You don't know how to hold yet." Cassian appears in the doorway, tie loosened in the international language of lost patience. "Ground rules," he says, and the list is both reasonable and impossible. Safety first, honesty always, no surprises, and call me if breath becomes a math problem. "Breath is always a math problem," Taya says. He blinks, then nods at a vintage inhaler framed on the wall like art. "Their mother collected antique medical equipment," he says. The sentence has too many ghosts for this time of day. Taya crouches to eye level with the twins. "Hi again," she says. Livia considers her. "You're back," she says, as if accusing. "I am," Taya answers. "Is that okay?" Leo flips the notebook to a page titled Bauline. "We are testing," he declares. They test like avalanches. Livia leads Taya to the kitchen and mutinies against dinner. Taya lets her pick vegetables and names them after planets. They argue about whether broccoli is an asteroid or a tree in disguise. Leo drops a glass and watches Taya's face for the flinch. She doesn't. She hands him a towel and says, "We clean and we tell the truth." He waits for the lecture about carelessness. It doesn't come. "We'll sweep for sparkle daggers," she says, which makes him grin in a way that looks unfamiliar on him, and familiar on boys who don't get to be boys in expensive houses. They move to homework. "We do not homework," Livia announces. "We execute educational autonomy. We call that homework," Taya says. "But your version sounds braver. Show me what you hate. We'll choose the part you can almost love." Livia drags out a reading log with entries that are either lies or executive summaries. "She's not dumb," Leo whispers, surprised in spite of himself. "She's a spy," Livia whispers back. "For who?" "For us," Leo decides, quickly, like the kind of hope you don't say out loud. Dinner is noodles. Taya cooks them too al dente, and the kids complain like food critics with hearts. "We need the crunchy parts softer," Livia announces. "I accept feedback," Taya says, stirring the pot like an apology. They eat at a table designed to impress adults and tell each other 3 good things and 1 bad thing. Good your noodles improved, Leo says. Good you didn't flinch when I broke a thing. Good you have a scar on your hand and you didn't hide it. Livia adds, bad you will leave. Taya doesn't tell the child a lie. Not tonight, she says. Livia stares at her face as if it could be rented. Promise. I promise to do tonight. Right. Taya says. Careful. This is a house where promises have been leveraged for good press and kids can smell a mortgage in your voice. Bath time is when the blitz begins. Leo refuses soap on principle. Livia tries to cut her own bangs with nail scissors. Someone flushes something that should never meet a pipe. Taya turns the chaos into choreography, narrating like a sports announcer for dignity. We now shampoo bravely, she says. We rinse without drowning. We keep scissors for paper and ambition. Leo asks for the 100th time if whales can swallow cities. Taya admits she doesn't know, and they decide to research in the morning. The kids rack up points on a whiteboard with categories like kindness, disguised bravery, and telling the whole story. Taya does not award points for stillness because stillness is not the point. In the quiet of towels and pajamas, Livia asks the real question. Are you going to be one of the nannies who tries to kiss him? She says, aiming her chin toward the hall Dad might be in. The question is a test, a trap, a memory. Taya answers with the only sentence that matters. No one kisses your dad without asking him, she says, and no one kisses me without asking me. Those are the rules in my house. This is my house until 9 o'clock. Livia's shoulders drop like a drawbridge. Leo exhales. Okay, he says. And the okay is heavier than most adult speeches. They read. Livia picks a book about a girl who refuses gifts that cost too much later. Leo picks a manual about knots and spends 20 minutes teaching Taya to tie a bowline in the dark. This one you can tie around your own waist if the boat is going down, he says. Deadpan. The wolf pack has contingency plans. Taya murmurs and the boy grins like a confession. At 8:57, Cassian stands in the doorway like someone afraid of knocking on his own life. His tie is gone. His shirt is rolled at the sleeves in surrender to something he cannot spreadsheet. He watches his children lean into a woman who is not terrified of them. That does more damage to his defenses than any boardroom loss. It's time, he says gently. Leo negotiates for 3 more minutes. Livia demands 4. Taya gives each 2. You're fair and mean, Livia says, which is a crown where she comes from. When the twins are down, breathing the same rhythm for once, Taya walks the map of the apartment the way paramedics walk a street, noting exits, obstacles, where the expensive plant becomes a hazard at night. Cassian follows, uncertain how to exist in his own hallway with a woman who talks to him like he is not a logo. They didn't break you, he says. They don't break people, Taya says. They expose loose bolts. He leans on the doorframe like a confession. They set a nanny's scarf on fire last month, he says, by accident, with a magnifying glass in the sun. Then we move the magnifying glass, Taya says, as if moving magnifying glasses is a job adults are allowed to have. Miss Price materializes as if paid for it. We'll see you tomorrow at 7, she says to Taya, voice like a signature. We'll confirm. She glides away before Taya can say she has another job at 6 delivering breakfast to a nurse on the night shift. Cassian hesitates. Can you start at 7? He asks, the question clumsy in a mouth used to telling. Taya calculates bus routes and her brother's inhaler. She looks at him and sees something he did not intend to show a candidate. I can, she says, but I have a condition. The word condition makes Miss Price's soul sit up even in another room. Which is? Cassian asks. No cameras near them, Taya answers. No surprise content for your dad brand accounts. No leaning on their grief for optics. If anyone points a phone at them without my say-so when I'm on duty, I will break the phone or the contract, whichever is cheaper. A corner of his mouth tries to be amused and becomes respect instead. Agreed, he says. Put it in writing, she adds. I will sign blood if necessary, but I want a notary for the blood. He huffs something like a laugh, then sobers.
Anything else? Yes, she says. You will be a person in front of them, not a headline. It will cost you 5 minutes of meetings in the morning and 3 at night. I'll build it into your schedule if Miss Price gives me access to your calendar. A beat. Please, she adds, because she knows the price of respect and uses the exact change. Access granted, he says. Somewhere, Miss Price experiences a symptom and cannot name it. Taya leaves at 9:30 into a rain that learned politeness. On the bus, her phone dings a transfer of $200 labeled Turiel Day. She almost texts thank you and does not, because gratitude is not a debt. She opens her notes app and writes the first draft of rules. 2 asked for hugs per day maximum, more if kid initiates. No adult secrets. Food is not a reward, food is fuel. We do not punish crying. We do not punish quiet. We practice disasters when the sun is up. The twins are up before she is. She arrives at 6:58 with breakfast burritos and a plan. The plan dies at 7:01 when she finds the pantry rearranged by a raccoon with a black card. They woke at 4, Miss Price says, immaculate. They built a fort in the pantry. We engineered a bastion, Leo corrects. We are sovereign, Livia adds, face maple syrup fierce. Taya steps into the cardboard kingdom and announces herself like a diplomat. Envoy from breakfast land, she says, holding up foil. We bring tribute and a peace treaty. Livia considers the burrito like a relic. What is in it? Egg, potatoes, courage. We only eat courage, Leo says gravely, biting. They walk to school. Security wants to tail discreetly and is bad at it. Taya tells the twins they are allowed to run to the corner and back. They time themselves. They beat themselves. They beat themselves again. Breath turns to math and does not betray them. On the way back, the bodyguard says, they like you. They like that I don't leave when it gets loud. Taya says, he nods like a man who begged for that sentence somewhere else and didn't get it. By afternoon, the house becomes a lab. The twins set up an experiment in the atrium. If you slide across the marble in socks, friction loses patience. A visiting board member slides both literally and metaphorically, and the rumor that the CEO's children are feral circulates like expensive perfume. Miss Price's jaw works a millimeter. We must present calm, she tells Taya, and means control. We must practice safety. Taya answers and means autonomy. Cassian walks in on friction day. Ty gone again, edge softening in increments. He watches his children run toward a pair of arms that do not flinch. Then his phone buzzes and a crisis sucks him sideways, because a board thinks schedule is sanctified and childhood can wait. The first injustice arrives disguised as a favor. A PR director with teeth like whiteboard squeaks asks to capture a little candid content of the new nanny settling in for internal morale. Taya says no with a smile that could file a lawsuit faster than a camera can open. The PR director laughs as if no's can be domesticated. Someone films anyway from far away. Taya stands between lens and kids like a wall that used to be a person. The footage is useless. A woman's back, 2 small blurs, a refusal carrying a badge that hasn't been printed yet. The second injustice does not pretend to be helpful. At midnight, Taya's door gets a letter taped to it. A noise warning for a building whose walls are thin and whose patience thinner. The noise was her brother's lungs wrestling a cold. She peels the letter off like it owes her rent and texts a neighbor with a good heart and a better toolbox. They stuff a towel under the door and call it insulation. She sets 2 alarms and is at Kestrel at 6:59 anyway, because poverty is punctual, when punishment loves tardiness. The twins escalate. If you can't handle us, Leo says, looking at her eyes for cracks that don't exist, you should say. If you want to break me, she says, you have to do better than a pantry coup and a sock slide. I was raised by a woman who ironed shirts to pay for my shoes. Livia considers this like math. Our mother didn't iron, she says. She painted. I can iron and paint. Taya says, I can also teach you to build a stove out of a coffee can in case the world forgets us for a night. Livia tries to look unimpressed, fails. We will need beans, she declares. After school, a small apocalypse. Leo refuses to go back into the house. He sits on the curb and announces we are on walk strike. Cameras exist somewhere at street level, quiet and hungry. Security looks to Miss Price. Miss Price looks to Cassian's calendar. Cassian looks to earnings per share. Taya sits on the curb beside a boy building a fortress out of mood. She doesn't talk. He doesn't either. After 2 minutes that feel like a lawsuit's opening statement, she says, "Would you like me to carry your backpack or your sadness?" He blinks. The heavy one. Backpack first, she decides, and shoulders it. Then what made today stupid? He lists injustices in the language of 6, a pencil that broke, a friend who didn't laugh at his joke, a teacher who said sit like a suggestion the floor misunderstood. She nods like a person whose job is to nod until a child has room for the right breath. 2 more minutes, he bargains. I have bread rising, she counters, a lie she plans to make true. He stands. She does not cheer. He is not a marathon, he is a boy who came home at 8:12 when bread does in fact rise because she wanted it to. The apartment smells like a memory that does not belong to this building and is welcome anyway. Cassian pauses in the doorway like a man who just reached a place he has been paying for and never inhabited. He watches his kids fight over a crust and lose to laughter. He looks at Taya with the expression of someone considering an investment in a currency he can't audit. They're asleep by 9, she tells him. You have 12 minutes. Use them. He goes. He stays 12 and 3 more. He reads 2 pages and makes a bad pirate voice that makes his daughter snort and his son forget to negotiate for 4. When the apartment goes quiet, Miss Price appears with a tray that wants to be tea and a contract that wants to be law. 6 weeks, she says. Trial. With review. The pages glitter with clauses that protect money from people and people from nothing. Add my clauses, Taya says. No filming. No using their grief to soften quarterly losses. Background checks on any new vendor that comes within 15 feet of their lungs. If finance wants them as optics, finance can buy a goldfish. You're not in a position to dictate terms, Miss Price says flatly. I'm in a position to walk, Taya answers. Across the room, Cassian's voice. Add them. Miss Price's mouth is a line that does not want to be a circle. As you wish, she says. And Miss Moreno. Yes, do not fall in love with this job, she says, which is both warning and plea. It will not love you back. Taya almost says, I don't need it to love me. I need it to pay rent and teach 2 small wolves that love isn't a circus. She says instead, I fall in love with results. Miss Price smiles with half of her face. You'll fit right in. The door closes on the first day that did not break. Somewhere in this building an enemy is already born, a CFO aunt who believes children belong to calendars, a PR director with a ring light where conscience should be, a board member whose hobby is leverage. Somewhere else the twins tape a new sign to their pantry fort. Maybe Nanny. Do not scare. Tomorrow they will test her again with a disaster that looks like glitter and a secret that smells like paint. And she will learn that the worst thing they ever did to a nanny had nothing to do with noise and everything to do with fear. Tonight, a woman who talks to grief like a roommate steps onto a bus with bread on her fingers and a contract in her bag that will try to own her unless she writes in the margins first. By the second morning, the twins have decided to test structural integrity. They greet Taya by dragging her into the kitchen in pajamas and capes to announce today is survival school. She says, perfect, and means it. She fills a pan with cold water, sets a tea light in the middle of a metal tray, and lays out a bowl of flour, a box of baking soda, and 2 towels. Rules first, she says, and points at the twins' chests. When Scary shows up, we get small and smart. Curl like a comma, cover eyes, breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth like fogging a window. We never throw flour on fire unless we want a fireworks show, and no eyebrows. Leo lights up like a switch. We want eyebrows, he declares. Livia nods solemnly. Eyebrows are dignity. They practice stop, drop, roll on rugs as if their lives depend on it, because someday a dumb accident will try to convince them their lives do. She lines up inhalers, checks spacers, times breaths to the beat of a stupid song that makes Leo snort. And importantly, remember, Cassian walks in on a chorus of int 2-3 out 2-3, sees his kids fogging imaginary glass with calm lens, and stops like a man who just found a door in a wall he was told was load-bearing. Is this fun? He asks, the word new in his mouth during a workday. It's boring, Livia says, proud. Boring saves lives. Taya adds, and Cassian files the sentence where he keeps investors' favorite phrases. At the door, Miss Price watches with the face she uses when an outcome she didn't design turns out better than her outcome would have. She says nothing, which is how approval sounds in this house. At school, drop off the headmistress. Silk scarf strict by an analogy to surprises, waves Taya aside for a quick chat that smells like a pre-written email. We adore the wolf children, she says in the tone of someone who tolerates natural disasters for tax benefits, but we must address disruptions. Livia refuses group quiet time. Leo corrects the science teacher. On what? Taya asks, curious rather than defensive. On whales swallowing cities, the headmistress admits, cheeks pink because she didn't check that whales cannot. Also, she glances at her clipboard. Livia commandeered the reading rug and reigned at a sovereign zone. Did she bite anyone? No. Did she hit? No. Did she use new vocabulary? In context? Yes. So we are successful, Taya says mildly, and the headmistress blinks the way adults blink when the narrative refuses to stand still. We're not asking for acquiescence, Taya adds. We're asking for the school to respect sensory breaks and to email in the moment, instead of the end of the week when shame has time to grow teeth. The counselor, a younger woman with practical shoes and a soft rebellion in her eyes, leans. We've been trying to get that policy through, she murmurs. Put it in writing, Taya says, with a spot for my signature and their father's. We'll make it dull and binding.
At noon, 2 emails arrive the way pigeons do. One useful, one disgusting. The useful one is the draft policy, sensory resets, and real-time escalation, attached by the counselor with 3 thank yous that sound like relief. The disgusting one is from Eva in PR. Subject line, Family Day, Content Capture Opportunities. Inside, bullet points, B-roll of Nanny acclimating, twins reshaping daddy's heart, soft domesticity, an emoji that should be illegal and corporate. A note, legal says okay, if shot from public space, no releases required for minors in public areas. That winky face feels like a crime. Taya prints it, walks to the office, sets it on Miss Price's desk, and says, if a phone points at them during my shift without parental consent, I will remove the phone and your wrist with the smoothness of the Lord. Miss Price studies the email, then Taya, and replies, I will inform PR that wrists are on the table. The first crack in the house's story appears in a hallway no one uses, a door marked storage, locked, unremarkable. Leo pauses there at 4:10, hand hovering near the knob like a moth near a porch light. Livia won't look at it at all. What's in there? Taya asks. Dust. Leo says too fast. And rules. Livia mutters. Faster. We're not allowed to talk about it. Who said? Everyone. Livia says. And the word is heavy for 6. Miss Price rounds the corner. Playroom, she suggests, too pleasantly. Something in the air makes Taya's neck prick, the way visitors pretend not to see a photo that hurts the host. Later, while the twins make a museum of stuffed animals and charge admission in buttons, Taya finds Price in the pantry labeling jars in a language called denial. The storage room, Taya says. Casual as asking for the time. Mrs. Wolf's studio, Price says. Equally casual, the consonants tendered. We keep it closed for preservation. For who? Taya asks. Everyone. Price repeats, and that answer, again, weighs more than it should. On the shelf behind her, a jar labeled lentils, another labeled sugar, a third labeled glitter. Seriously, do not. The labels are a prayer against chaos. Chaos remembers prayers, The twins hold until Thursday before attempting a coup that earns respect. They switch the sugar and salt jars. The pastry chef, a man who loves butter more than most people love their own reflections, salts a batch of apple tarts into tragedy. Livia tries not to laugh and fails, then confesses with the sudden terror of kids who think jail is immediate and downstairs. Taya doesn't yell. She kneels, steady. "What were you trying to do?" she asks. "An experiment," Leo says. "On adults," Livia adds, "to see if anyone notices before it's too late." There it is, the hypothesis of children who have watched storms walk in suits. "We do experiments with consent," Taya says, "and our variables don't have ovens." She makes them apologize to the chef, who accepts with a lecture on caramelization that contains a master class in forgiveness. He slides over a bowl of peeled apples. "You can save it," he says. "Good scientists repair too." That night, after bedtime, Taya peels her own fear. What else are they swapping to see if anyone notices? Sorrow for attention, rules for love. Late, because grief keeps the strangest hours. Cassian texts, "Can you come to the office event tomorrow? Family day." The twins hate it. "I do too. I'll pay overtime." She replies, "I will come if we write the no filming clause in caps and tattoo it on the intern's forehead." He texts back a single word that feels like a sigh, "Learning courage." Agreed. Morning of family day. A black car waits for the twins that at least tries not to look like a carriage. The lobby of Kestrel HQ smells like citrus, new carpet, and ambition fluffed with a fork. Banners shout words money likes: innovate, stability, future, while children in tiny blazers pick at fruit kebabs like board members who were promised croissants. A photo booth lurks like a trap with filters labeled legacy and hustle. A balloon arch defines the path to the rooftop, where the glass parapet promises views and lawsuits. Eva from PR flits with a headset, and the buoyant malice of people who think optics is oxygen. Just a few candids. She chirps toward Taya, who does not chirp. "No," Taya answers. "A quiet hydra. We're honoring their absent mother," Eva says, weaponizing empathy. "Then honor her off camera," Taya says, weaponizing policy. The CFO aunt introduces herself with a handshake that feels like a warning. Amara Wolf, impeccable suit, eyes like math, a voice honed in rooms that hate interruptions. "So you're the new variable," she says, as if proud of landing the metaphor on the first try. "I prefer guardrail," Taya returns. Amara's gaze sweeps the twins and tightens. "They've had too much autonomy," she tells Taya, not lowering her voice. "Children are comforted by structure. They're comforted by safe structure," Taya says, "not performative structure." Amara's smile is all veneer. "We'll speak after the program." She steps away to brief a cluster of men whose ties match. Eva ushers a crew of documentarians to the far side of the crowd, the quotes around the word audible. The first program is a soft-edge slideshow. Rhea Wolf painting in a sunlit room. Rhea holding infants. Rhea laughing at something off-frame that now feels like a rumor. The twins go still, the way children do when a ghost walks through their day. Livia's fists open and close. Leo's mouth flattens into an engineer's line. Taya sits between them like infrastructure. "Do you want to leave?" she whispers. "We want to not be looked at," Livia says through teeth. "We want whales," Leo says to nobody. "I want privacy for my children," Cassian says aloud, suddenly less CEO than father, and more dangerous for the room. He guides them to a side stairwell, where the building forgets itself, and admits it has lungs. That's when the trap springs on the roof. A bubble machine goes berserk, and slicks the walkway with innocence. A candid crew swings a camera, like a spotlight. A child, someone else's, slips and wails. A flock of onlookers turns. Phones up, hungry for what comes next. Amara gestures sharply to security at the exact second. Eva shoves a mic into a space meant for air. The twins freeze inches from the edge of the slick, because Taya has made boring reflex. She plants, grips shoulders, lowers two bodies with muscle memory that grew in a hospital night shift, and learned never to let go. We go small and smart, she whispers. They curl, she scans, then she barks. Salt, the pastry chef, who came up with a tray, because he always brings food to meetings that make him anxious, dumps kosher crystals in a line like a saint, creating roughness where PR made grease. Nebulizer, if anyone has one, she calls on instinct, because panic is an asthma trigger. A mother produces a device like a miracle, and Taya counts breaths to the dumb song for a stranger's child, while the room remembers that children are not content. Amara steps in, voice calm, hair unbothered by crisis. We appreciate the quick response, she tells cameras. Manufacturing, we out of nothing, and appreciate out of theft. Eva pivots to the new angle. Nanny saves the day. But the sentence turns to chalk when Cassian takes the mic, with a voice built for earnings calls, and uses it for something indecorous. Apology. We set this wrong, he says to the assembled partners and donors and content vagrants. We invited optics to a family's boundary. We're done with that. Family Day is for families, not footage. Everyone without a child in your hand, please go downstairs. The roof clears in a murmurous migration of disappointed spectators and confused executives. Amara says, "We'll discuss this in executive." "We will," he replies, "and we'll do it with my calendar open at bedtime." He turns to Taya like a man mid-court martial, asking a corporal how to aim. "What next?" "Water," she says. "Carb, quiet, and no more ghosts on screens without consent." He nods, a muscle in his jaw considering rebellion and choosing to be useful. That night, two things happen that are not accidents. 1. A fake account posts a grainy shot of Taya near the locked studio door, with the caption, "New nanny poking around dead wife's things. Disrespectful." 2. A discipline consultant shows up in Miss Price's inbox with impeccable references, and a program that promises to tame oppositional twins in 3 days. His name is Dr. Klein. His picture is the doctor version of Amara's suit. He requests immediate access to the children's rooms and the grief site, the studio for exposure therapy. Amara forwards with, "Approved." Price forwards to Cassian with, "Your call." Cassian forwards to Taya with, "Thoughts." She replies with a bullet list that gut punches politely. 1. No. 2. Further no. 3. Exposure to grief isn't therapy, it's cruelty. 4. If you want therapy, get therapy. I'll make soup. At 3 a.m., someone tries the studio door. Taya is on the couch, because her brother's cough bought a night on the noisier side of mercy, and she didn't trust the house to keep its promises while tired. She hears the knob click, the hinge whisper. She follows the sound with cheap ninja feet, and finds Leo on the floor in a puddle of moonlight, a hairpin in his hand, a determination older than 6 in his face. Taya doesn't ask what he's doing. She sits and waits for him to remember. She's there. He whispers, "We're not supposed to go in there. Do you want to go in?" "Yes," he says, furious with wanting. "No," he says, terrified of getting it. "Both," he says, honest. She holds out her palm. He drops the pin into it like a verdict. She tucks it behind her ear. "Tomorrow," she says, with permission, or with a better version of forgiveness. In the morning she asks Price for keys. Price denies. "We preserve." "You preserve dust," Taya says. "They're preserving fear." Price's eyes flick to a world Taya hasn't been invited to and back. "If Mr. Wolf authorizes, he will," Taya says with an audacity she has to make interest payments on. Cassian arrives mid-standoff, hair less perfect than Fear thinks it should be. "What's happening?" "We're going in," Taya says. He hesitates, and she watches a man make a decision no executive curriculum ever taught. Break a shrine to save a child. He unlocks the door. The studio smells like turpentine in memory. Light falls in diagonals across canvases that never saw their last brushstroke. On a table, a tiny half-painted whale, a smear of cobalt, a scrap of paper with Ria's loopy handwriting. Whales don't swallow cities, they carry them. And a date that makes Cassian step backward like air hit him too hard. Livia doesn't move. Leo holds himself like a trapped bird. Touch with eyes, Taya says, because reverence is quiet but must not be wordless. She reads the scrap out loud like a spell. Whales don't swallow cities, they carry them. Leo looks at her like she returned a stolen toy. Livia touches the table with one fingertip. Electric. She said that. She whispers, not a question. She did, Cassian says, barely. She told stories wrong on purpose, so we'd fix them, Livia adds, and her mouth breaks into a smile that hurts everyone in the room and heals something anyhow. They schedule 15 minutes in the studio every Wednesday labeled Whales. They make a rule, you can miss Whales for nothing except breathing trouble or funerals, and Whales can be rescheduled for neither. Price prints it and tapes it inside a cabinet, as if law needs doors. Amara arrives at noon with Dr. Klein like a storm with paperwork. You circumvented protocol, she tells Cassian. I opened a door for my children, he answers. Klein performs concerned eyebrows. We must not indulge fantasy, he says, scanning Taya as if she is the fantasy. A woman who won't be bullied. Grief has to be invited to leave. Grief lives here, Taya says. It pays rent. We teach it manners and give it chores. Amara slides her sharper card. There is also the matter of the nanny's past. Anonymous tips suggest instability. A folder thumps on the table. Inside, screenshots of Taya's eviction notice, her brother's ER visits, a photo of her hugging a woman on a stoop at 2 a.m. This is not proper, Amara says, wanting to sting and pretending to instruct. That is poverty, Taya says. It looks messier in print than in real life. Cassian, to his credit, doesn't flinch for long. I hired stability, he says. I got competence. He turns to the consultant. You're done. Klein bristles. You'll regret this, he says, because men who sell obedience always think they are selling safety. We already did, Cassian replies, so quietly it sounds like progress. That evening, Taya's brother's lungs declare war. She texts Price, late. Price answers with a time-off calendar and an extra oxygen canister she shouldn't have, but does, because house managers are rule breakers when love whispers please. Taya sits on the bathroom floor in the blue light of a phone with a timer, counting down albuterol puffs and up the seconds between wheezes. The door buzzes. When she opens, Cassian stands there with a nebulizer he borrowed from the corporate wellness closet, hair damp from rain, because he didn't call his driver for this errand. He doesn't enter like a savior. He enters like a man who would like to be useful. I know the machine, he says. I read the brochure. Everyone reads the brochure, Taya says, smiling out of fatigue. Few people translate it. He sets up the treatment with the clumsy care of people who don't often get to be clumsy. Nico sleeps, finally. The apartment smells like saline and relief. Cassian washes the nebulizer cup in a sink with a leaky faucet. He doesn't fix because this is not his house. He leaves quietly. On the doormat, a bag of groceries, bananas, broth, saltines, that Taya accepts without debt. By texting a photo of the receipt and a note, I'll repay in bread. The next morning, the fake account escalates. Blurry video of Taya entering the studio with the twins. Caption: New nanny oversteps rules, uses dead mom art for clout. Comments are knives with manners. Eva forwards to Price with a shrug emoji, which is worse than malice. Amara forwards to the board group chat with optics. Soraya King, the one director who has 2 first names and a conscience, replies, children are not optics, which is why she has fewer friends and stronger votes. Price forwards to Cassian with 1 word, sorry. He replies with 2, my fault. And for once a man's accountability doesn't try to rent applause. At school, a classmate tells Livia that her mom is content. Livia punches a wall so she won't punch a face and scares herself with the noise.
The headmistress schedules a chat. Taya attends, arrives early, breathes boring into the room, and lays out material. Policy on real-time escalation. Copy of the ordinance protecting kids from being turned into marketing without consent, printed on purpose for the drama. A letter from Cassian stating explicitly that his minor children are not to be filmed by school, parents, PR, or God. The headmistress signs a copy for her file, which is what grown-up victory looks like. Black ink, dull font, names in the right places. Livia holds Taya's hand on the way out, then pretends she didn't. Family Day's fallout continues as if scripted by a man who wrote a thesis on leverage. Amara calls an executive and moves to formalize boundaries with household staff. It's corporate for shrink the nanny until she can be folded. Taya doesn't attend that meeting. She attends to the twins who build a city out of boxes labeled fragile and name it courage. Leo drafts safety codes. Livia writes a constitution that forbids adults from calling feelings drama and mandates whales on Wednesdays. Taya bakes bread with too much rosemary and calls it learning. In the executive, Price, uninvited, sends a memo anyway, listing every night. Taya stayed late because grief messed with clocks and every feint Klein attempted. She titles it Boring Saves Lives and BCC's Soraya. It lands like a chair being set back where it belongs. The break comes at a time tragedies prefer a Friday, at 5:58, when cities forget nuance and choose traffic. Cassian stands in the doorway of the studio with the twins, painting cobalt whales on craft paper because nobody wants to ruin their mother's canvases. Amara arrives with the board's legal counsel and a packet labeled Provost Domestic Conduct Policy. Clause 4.2, no household worker shall use, reference, or access the private effects of the deceased Mrs. Wool. Clause 5.1, minor children shall not engage with spaces of grief without a licensed oversight. Clause 5.2, licensed oversight to be provided by approved consultant, attached. The consultant is Klein in a new font. Cassian reads and puts the packet down as if it squeaked. No, he says, you don't get to vote on my children's whales. Amara sets her shoulders. Then we vote on you. The twins watch from behind sheets of blue and hear the thing all children eventually hear. Family is a place and a meeting. Taya steps between whales and policy like a firewall pretending to be a person. I have an idea, she says, not for optics, for outcome. She holds up a schedule with ink that smudged because her hand was sweating. Whale Wednesdays with a grief therapist who lives in the world and not on TV. She knows one. St. Magnus had a woman who taught parents to use honest words, a boring reflex drill calendar, a staff bill of dignity for the house, no filming, human breaks, no service narrative content ever, and a clause requiring Cassian to spend 8 minutes daily with each twin separately. Eyes on, phone away, because love that feels scheduled still counts. Add a policy for the company while we're here, she adds, cheek fierce. No minor may be filmed on any Kestrel property without written parental consent. No household employee may be used for public relations without written consent and money. No grief adjacencies in marketing. If you need a story, get a spreadsheet. Soraya, who arrived quietly, like conscience in flats, says, I second. Council says, you can't vote on domestic matters here. Soraya says, we can vote on our PR budget and where it aims. They argue. It is not the last argument. It is the first useful one. Amara stares down her brother for a full 10 seconds that smell like childhood and triumph and loss. You were never meant to run alone, she says, not unkind. Then help me run the right direction, he replies, more plea than challenge. She looks at the twins, blue hands, fierce eyes and sighs. We will pilot your whales, she says, as if the word might stain her blazer. And we will kill the Family Day content calendar. If quarterly calls wobble, I will remind you you chose this. Please do, he says, and means it. That night, because victory always rents the room next to setback, someone tapes a new letter to Taya's door. Notice of lease termination for unauthorized medical equipment use. It is retaliation for breathing. She pulls it down and texts Beatrice, because the universe puts one Beatrice in every city. Taya found hers at St. Magnus when a patient needed a guardian angel with a bar license. Beatrice sends back a 3-line template that reads like thunder in Times New Roman. Taya copies it out and slides it under the landlord's door with a photo timestamp because paper scares bad men more than speeches. The weekend is whale blue and bread brown. They practice disasters in daylight, smoke alarm, lost kid protocols. What if the elevator forgets us? They tape laminated cards behind door frames with instructions that would bore a burglar. They flip over the glitter jar and write, in Sharpie, use with a lawyer present. They eat too many apples because Taya's poverty reflex misread a sale. They laugh at the chef's salted tart failure and build a memorial to it with a napkin flag. Price smiles with her whole face exactly once. Taya catches it and files it under culture shift. On Monday, at 8:31, the school calls Leo locked himself in the supply closet. On the way, Taya asks, what's our plan? Don't let them turn my no into bad, Leo says through the door when she arrives. It's not bad, she says. It's a comma. She sits on the floor in the hallway, back to the wall, and speaks through wood. I brought whales, she lies, and then remembers Rhea's scrap and doesn't have to lie. She fishes it out of her wallet, where she tucked it after photographing it and reading it 3 times while drying spoons. Whales don't swallow cities, she reads. They carry them. There is silence, then the click of a lock. Okay, he says, as if pronouncing a verdict not on the page but life. When they get home, Leo ties a bowline around Taya's waist, tugs once, and says, this is for rescue. Who rescues who? She asks. We take turns, Livia says, as if she invented the idea and will sell it for too much later. Dr. Klein tries one more time, through a podcast. Narcissistic care, he intones, from well-meaning caregivers who center themselves. The show plays a clip of Taya saying boring saves lives, calls it performative competence, and asks listeners whether women without training should be permitted to meddle in elite families. The producer DMs Taya for comment. She declines with a link to a paper on childhood trauma and a photo of a laminated checklist that says 00. Gets called first when tears happen. Taya placed herself fourth. Kid, other kid, parent, nanny, chef for cookies. The DM thread leaks anyway. Someone calls her a saint. Someone else calls her a social climber with good hair. Price prints the worst one and feeds it to the shredder with a smile. The week ends with a surprise that should not be one. A note in Rhea's handwriting taped beneath a drawer in the studio, found because Livia was searching for a pencil like a mole with degrees. It says in blue paint that bled at the edges, if you are reading this and I am not beside you, start with soup, then make art, then ask your dad why he hides when we are brave. He will stop. Livia brings it to Taya like contraband. Do we show him? She asks, heavy with the power of a sentence that can rearrange a home. Yes, Taya says, because secrets that hurt are not scaffolding, they are traps. That night she watches a man read a note from a woman who refused to be dead on their terms. She watches him sit. She watches him bend, not collapse around the truth that love is work. The twins climb onto his lap uninvited and are not told to be careful around grief, which tells them everything they need to know about tomorrow. On the calendar, in ink, Price cannot unprint without scissors. Taya writes, Wales, wed 3:30. Drill says, wed 3:30. Drill 2 ril, 2 4 o'clock. Bread, anytime. She snaps a photo and sends it to Cassian with a message that sounds like a dare and a kindness. New weather pattern. Boring with whales. Bring your boots. He replies with the emoji men use when they want to say thank you without games. The next invite that pings his phone is labeled 8 minutes each. Livia, Leo registered trademark. Accept/decline/reschedule. He presses accept, and the whole house, down to the jars, rearranges around that click. And somewhere in a conference room, Amara drafts a memo about de-emphasizing personality content while texting Eva that the nanny angle is off limits unless someone else makes it a story first. Somewhere Klein sends an invoice for services not rendered and receives a reply from legal that might as well be a lullaby. Somewhere the school counselor prints her new policy and gives a copy to 3 other counselors who have been waiting for permission to value commas over compliance. Somewhere in a studio that smells like turpentine in future, a half-painted whale waits for 6 small blue fingers and 2 larger trembling ones. And somewhere very close, a woman whose job is to be infrastructure writes a shopping list with boring on it twice because practice makes permanent. And the storms that wrecked every nanny have finally met a wall that learned to breathe. By the 3rd week, the house has a rhythm and a rumor. The rhythm is boring wails on Wednesdays, drills on Thursdays, bread when emotions need starch, 8 minutes each child with their father every night, no matter the market. The rumor is not that the nanny has ideas, that the twins wrote a constitution, that the CEO canceled content and smiled at a room full of people who expected him to choose optics. Rumors make enemies and allies out of the same faces. Eva observes with a headset and an ache. Amara watches with a pen and a plan she won't set down. Dr. Klein sulks on podcasts and waits for a relapse he can invoice. Miss Price keeps the calendar beating like a second heart and pretends not to be proud. On Whale Wednesday, the studio is a country with new laws. The twins paint on brown paper taped to the floor so their mother's canvases are safe. Cassian sits on a stool with his tie in his pocket and his phone 2 rooms away as required by the Constitution. Taya lays out brushes, 3 sizes, plus sponges for cowards and courage for everyone. Leo paints a city on a whale's back, a grocery and a school and a bench with a father-shaped stick figure on it. Livia paints a whale, opening its mouth and releasing streetlights like stars. Whales don't swallow cities, she reminds the room. They carry them, Cassian completes, practicing the sentence like a language that is starting to fit his mouth. At 4:10, a delivery man no one recognizes rolls a road case through the service entrance. Price signs because autographing boxes is most of her job. The case says alter events in a font with too much self-esteem. Inside the case, as will be discovered later, are 3 fog cannons and a box of biodegradable confetti the color of panic. But right now Price just sees tape and a schedule for the Investor Summit on Friday with family-friendly activations scribbled beside a rooftop time slot. She forwards the schedule to Taya, out of habit. Taya reads it, sitting on the studio floor, paint on her jeans and a knot behind her right eye that always shows up when a trap is setting itself. That same afternoon, the headmistress's email arrives with the authority of a stamp, following an incident in which Miss Livia struck a wall to avoid striking a peer. We recommend a behaviorist consult and a temporary removal from group lunch to reduce sensory triggers. Taya writes back, we accept reduced stimuli, not reduced dignity. We propose a quiet table with an adult who knows the difference between meltdown and message. We will attend, on paper and in person. She copies the counselor and Cassian. The counselor replies with 3 yeses that read like a rescue. Cassian replies, I'll sit the first quiet lunch. Amara replies, we do not have the bandwidth for bespoke school interventions. Taya starts to reply something that will set a fire, deletes it, writes,
We'll make the bandwidth. Bring your appetite. At 2:03 a.m. the night before the summit, Taya wakes to Nico's cough leveling up in the next room. The nebulizer purrs. The timer ticks. The wheeze fights, then relents. On the doormat, another letter. Notice. Hearing scheduled, because landlords love court more than maintenance. She adds court to a list under bread, then deletes it because lists don't get to pretend these have equal weight. Investor Summit branding arrives in the lobby like an apology that refuses to actually say sorry. Banners promise eye integrity, stewardship, the long view. Eva rehearses lines about transparency, which is to say visibility at a distance you can control. The family-friendly activation remains deliberately vague. Price corners Cassian in the elevator. "Who approved Altair?" she asks, pointing with her eyebrows at the case that keeps moving around the building as if it owns keycards. "Events," he says, then catches himself. Events means Eva. He texts Eva, "What is family-friendly activation, exactly?" Eva responds with 3 balloon emojis, and fatally, "You'll love it." He does not love it. He writes, "No kids on camera. Remind your crew." She replies, "Public space rules." He texts back, "Not rules, my rules." No, he means it. The emoji does not. Friday comes dressed as confidence and smelling like citrus. Kestrel's auditorium fills with people who can make money clap. Soraya sits near the front with a pen that has scalped more than one bad idea. Amara presides at the back of the room like a queen, who knows knives love throats, and keeps hers behind glass. Cassian does the sober dance, opens with numbers that are honest enough to feel dangerous, and dull enough to feel safe. He mentions the foundation once, and not as a comb. He doesn't mention whales. The room settles into believing him. On the roof, Altair's staff lay cable in loops like snakes. A documentary crew leans against parapets and pretends not to have instructions. The bubble machine sits where the wind will be cruelest. Next to it, under a tarp, the fog cannons nap like animals preferring bad ideas. Taya does what she always does, inventory of threats. She traces cords to outlets, asks 3 too many questions, locates the nearest breaker panel, props open the stair door with her shoe, because wind loves to slam fragile things. Price watches her like a person watching a dam and deciding to trust gravity for once. The twins arrive in sneakers and ferocity. Price pins small name tags to their shirts with an efficiency that made them laugh. Livia reads hers out loud. "Livia, that's me." Title: Co-President of Wales. Leo says Chief Bowline. Taya has no tag. She prefers being a verb. Eva intercepts like a venomous tour guide. "We'll need the family at the parapet at the end of the program," she says to Price. Not to Cassian, not to Taya. Just a wave. Taya steps between the wave and the ocean. "We'll need railings and consent," she says. Eva's smile becomes paperwork. "We're in a public space," she repeats, as if any of that is public to the 6-year-olds who live under these banners. "We're on a privately owned roof," Soraya says from nowhere, having developed the useful habit of becoming present at moments of hypocrisy. "And the board adopted a no minor filming policy this week." Eva blinks. "We don't have that document." "Now you do," Soraya says, hand-delivering a copy like a subpoena with a bow. The program ends with applause. That sounds relieved. The donation thermometer graphic pretends to matter. Then, as if it were inevitable, someone flips a switch nobody asked to be flipped. The bubble machine hums into overachieving. Bubbles coat the walkway with a film that looks pretty and behaves like ice. The confetti cannons, on a remote program that does not belong to Kestrel's system, fire off a blizzard of shreds, so light they ride every breath into every lung. The fog cannons kick. A low-frequency tone vibrates the bones of kids with sensory systems already tired from existing. Phones jump like insects to light. Some adult says, "So cute," because adults can be cruel without meaning harm. A child, someone else's, slips. A sound of pain snaps 100 heads toward the edge. Boring saves lives, but only if you practiced it when no one wanted to clap. Taya moves first. Small and smart, she says over the hum, and two little bodies fold without asking why. Ears, she says. And she has ear defenders out of her bag before a producer has his disclaimer. Salt, she barks. Because salt won once. It can win again. The pastry chef, bless all pastry chefs, sprints with a tub and lays a white grid of salvation across the slick breakers, she tells Price, who runs like a woman done apologizing for competence. Nebulizer. A parent pulls one from a diaper bag like a universe that finally rewarded packing. Taya pulls her hoodie over Leo and counts to the dumb song he insisted they use in drills. In 2-3, out 2-3, and his chest obeys. Livia clutches Taya's arm with the strength of a child who has decided this is her wall. Eyes on me, Taya says. You are carried. You are carried. Livia repeats, we are carried, which is better than prayer. Below, the feed to the auditorium shows fog and confetti and the suggestion of peril. Amara stands, already mid-sentence. We are ending the live portion. Eva hisses, don't cut into her headset, because viral is a god. Cassian doesn't ask a committee. He walks to the AV pit and makes a decision money hasn't let him make in years. Kill the feed, he says, and for once everyone listens to the person with the best idea instead of the most shares. The screen goes to an emergency slate that reads, we're with our families, back in 5. Nobody is back in 5. They are busy being people. Up on the roof. A hand reaches for Livia's elbow. Security? No. Dr. Klein, who should have been somewhere far away from this building, moves in like a man grabbing a headline. Let's desensitize, he begins, and Taya has a hand on his wrist so fast, the air blushes. We don't desensitize kids to danger, she says, calm with teeth. We stop making danger. He tugs. A mistake. Price appears behind him with a stare that could overturn contracts and whispers. Leave, he says. You'll hear from my attorney. She replies, give him my regards, and marks a quiet X on a list in her head that ends with a door that won't open for him again. The confetti finds Leo's throat, because confetti is glitter that graduated college. His breath goes shallow, the math goes wrong. The dumb song keeps rhythm anyway. The nebulizer purrs. The salt roughens. The fog dies as Price throws the breaker. A quiet falls that isn't silence. It's a room deciding whether it will be decent. Cassian arrives, hair wrong, eyes right. He doesn't ask optics what to do. He asks Taya, what next? Elevator down, she says. Water, carb, quiet room, and fire Eva. Eva hears from 10 feet away and laughs because adrenaline is cruel. Amara says, she's right. It's not an apology to Taya. It's a correction to herself. In the quiet room, a conference space, someone had the sense to fill with plants instead of awards. The twins recalibrate under a dumb blanket everyone will eventually call sacred. Leo's lungs find a rhythm and decide to keep it. Livia's fists release. She cries angry, embarrassed tears that look like weakness to people who don't know. Tears are maintenance. Cassian sits on the floor because the chair is too corporate for this. Taya hands them water and a napkin, and then does the riskiest thing she has done all month. She sits down too, not as staff but as structure. No one dies. The world does not fall. The policy in the air, no one uses children as PR, builds a new rib. Downstairs, phones keep doing what they do. Someone pushes a grainy shot of Taya leading the twins down the stairwell with the caption, Nanny grabs kids. Dad stays for donors. It trends for 6 minutes. Then a second clip posts. Cassian saying kill the feed, and the screen going dark with we're with our families. It trends for longer, because occasionally the internet prefers a decent man to a tidy lie. Soraya texts, Beatrice, yes, there is always one with 3 words. Find the contract. Beatrice replies, on my way. Amara finds Eva in the AV hallway trying to salvage footage. Public space rules. Eva starts. The phrase now tasting like spoiled milk. Board policy. Amara returns, the new phrase wearing fresh shoes. You're done. PR isn't the problem. Eva tries. People are. Then let's have different people. Amara says, it isn't drama. It's maintenance done at scale. By evening the building is tired like a body after fever. The roof dries. The Altair case is resealed and waiting for a courier who won't be allowed back in the zip code. Dr. Collins' badge stops working because Price pressed 2 keys on a keyboard with the satisfaction of a goddess flipping a switch on a mountain. The twins are in pajamas eating buttered rice because complicated days demand simple food. That's when the other shoe, of course there's another shoe, drops. A process server with a sad tie arrives at Taya's door with 2 envelopes. One, a court date for eviction. The landlord claims dangerous medical devices. The nebulizer voided her lease. 2, a temporary protective order. Request from a group calling itself Friends of Rhea Wolf, alleging disrespect of the deceased and unauthorized use of a private studio, filed by an attorney whose letterhead is very expensive and whose conscience is in escrow. It is not the judge's order. It is a petition. It is designed to frighten. It works. A little for a minute. Taya texts Price, then Beatrice. Beatrice writes back, I love when bullies file. See you at 9 a.m. with receipts. Price writes back, the studio was opened by Mr. Wolf. They can file their feelings somewhere else. Cassian shows up to the apartment in a hoodie that makes him look like an apology with legs and a paper bag that smells like soup. He doesn't enter like a solution. He enters like a man who intends to carry something heavy. We'll handle the eviction, he says. We? She asks. Because poor people learn to interrogate pronouns for sport. Kestrel has a housing assistance fund I've been misusing for optics, he says. We'll use it for housing. For employees, not press releases. I'm not a charity, she says. Gentle truth. Your staff, he says. This is compensation for a job you're doing that saves me from mistakes I made before you arrived. And if you won't accept money, accept a lawyer. I'm already paying. She does. Because the right kind of pride knows when to sit. In court the next morning, the landlord arrives in a suit that looks like IamNotTheVillain.com. Beatrice, wearing a cardigan that understates its power, introduces herself and hands the judge 3 papers. The city ordinance against retaliation for involuntary public attention, a doctor's note prescribing a nebulizer, and a letter from the building's insurance policy requiring landlord compliance with medical devices. The judge, who has had exactly enough of performative legal drama this week, dismisses the petition with a sentence that should be printed on mugs. You may not evict someone for breathing. The Friends of Rhea Wolf petition is scheduled for a hearing, then evaporates when Soraya calls the attorney's managing partner and asks whether he enjoys losing public interest cases while she is on her lunch break. At school, the quiet table debuts. Cassian sits with Livia and 3 kids who have learned to hide under competence. A boy who hums, a girl who stares at ceilings to think, a child who lines up carrots into cities and eats the suburbs first. He does not perform a father, he does the job. Saya watches from the hall out of sight and makes a note under the heading, We're getting somewhere. The day after the summit, Kestrel holds an emergency board meeting that is actually an emergency hearts meeting. We cannot be in the business of raising minor volatility for content, Soraya says. It costs money. It costs lungs. Amara brings emotion and language she despises, but respects codify the staff bill of dignity across corporate, not just household. Ban minor filming. Kill any service narrative budgets. Fire, Altair, audit PR. The vote is not unanimous, because men who like authentic moments argue that authentic is a synonym for true. They lose. The motion passes. Eva resigns before she can be fired. Dr. Klein posts a thread about narcissistic help that 3 of his colleagues quietly like and then delete.
because it is bad luck to co-sign cruelty in the open. Whale Wednesday evolves. The grief therapist from St. Magnus, Dr. Seema, shoes sensible, voice like a muscle you trust, sits on the floor with the twins and teaches the house to say died instead of gone. She shows Livia how to find 3 colors in the room when feelings roar. She teaches Leo that a bowline is a metaphor of the universe, signed off on long before Rhea needed it. She tells Cassian that apologies do not lose value when repeated, offers him a script, and tells him to use it like oxygen. He does badly, at first, better the second, eventually like breathing. And because the world refuses to allow one gracious week, the storm arrives, literal, not metaphor. The forecast is sloppy. The city calls it a system. The news calls it a bomb cyclone, which is a sentence that knows it will trend. Water muscles, the gutters, the wind practices cruelty. Kestrel Tower gets a memo from facilities, predicting potential sprinkler compromise on floors 30 through 32, because a sensor hiccuped and an outside vendor, Altair's cousin, with a different haircut, messed in a ceiling without permission. Price routes the memo to everyone who matters. Taya sees the word sprinkler compromise and turns into a woman inside a drill. We practice disasters, she says to the twins Saturday morning. We stack towels under doors. We move rugs. We stage the inhalers. We teach the plants to swim if we have to. Leo asks if whales can climb stairs. Livia asks if ghosts like rain. Everybody likes soup, Taya says, and puts on a pot. At 9:13 p.m., the sensor trips. The 31st floor sighs and then hisses. The ceiling releases its version of the past. Water pours with the arrogance of buildings that thought they were above such pedestrian physics. The studio door, 2 floors up, is safe for now. The nursery is on the 33rd. The playroom is on 31. Price calls all hands with a voice like a bell. Security chases water like you chase a rumor. The children stand at the edge of the hallway flood and consider whether this is a whale problem or a shoe problem. Shoe, Taya decides, and sloshes them onto her shoulders 2 at a time. Leo first, Livia after, then back again. Pants rolled, dignity surrendered to the job at hand. In the stairwell, a woman who once told herself she'd never mop again carves a path with a broom, directs staff like an orchestra, and tells the storm where it can sit. She leads a small caravan of neighbors, night porter, pastry chef, analyst with a beagle and a tote, down toward dry and up toward breathing depending on where the water wants to play. On 31, a ceiling tile gives up with a sound like a bad plan. We can't save walls, Taya says. We can save lungs. Cassian appears soaked and unimportant in exactly the right way, carrying dehumidifiers in both hands because wealth finally found the correct weight. Amara holds a stack of towels high like a offering. Her hair stops being a brand and starts being hair. Price saves a box without a label, because labels lie and this one hums mother. They ferry it to the studio where Dr. Seema meets them with tarps and the assurance that grief tolerates rain better than you'd think. They move the canvases to a drier corner and pretend the ceiling isn't testing everyone's religion. A crack of lightning flicks the power, winks the building, then leaves everything humming in emergency mode. Emergency lighting makes executives look like people. In the thin glow, Leo ties a bowline around Taya's middle and clips the other end to a stair rail with a carabiner. Price produced from a pocket like magic. Livia takes charge of the beagle. We are carried, she tells the dog. The dog believes her. Down on 31, the sprinkler insists on remembering a child named Jonah from the rooftop of Very Bad Ideas. His mother appears with a plastic bag of things and a face that forgave too much last week and now wants to be mad. Taya hands her the good blanket. We're 2 doors down, she says. Soup in 10 minutes. The woman laughs in the way women laugh when they don't realize other women came to town with fire. I'll bring the crackers, she says, fierce at last. In the middle of the mess, Because it is the law of narrative now. Someone tries to make a phone into a stage. This is crazy, a junior exec whispers, panning across the chaos like a tourist where people live. His camera catches the twins in pajama silhouettes under emergency lights. Taya's hand appears and covers the lens with a palm that says "Law." "No," she says. "Not now. Not them. Not ever." "Public space," he says weakly. "You're in a hallway," she says, "which is where you will remain employed if you comply." He lowers the phone like a flag that finally learned its war is over. They get through the hour the way people do, badly, laughing, swearing in languages the building forgot it housed, carrying heavy things correctly. The storm eventually remembers it has an ocean elsewhere and leaves. The sprinklers cough their last apology. The dehumidifiers hum a lullaby written by insurance adjusters. In the studio, a whale painted by Rhea and two kids, and a father who finally knows how to sit dries under a fan that Price wheeled in like mercy. At midnight, soaked and ruined and more alive than they have any right to be, they eat soup from mugs because bowls are too formal for survival. Cassian looks at a home that failed with dignity and says, "We're changing vendors," which is the most executive sentence he's allowed to say right now without violating the sacredness of driftwood and towels. Amara nods in surrender to a fact she had not planned to encounter. She is better at running a company when her brother is a father first. Price toasts with a spoon. "To boring," she says. "To boring," they answer and mean it. When the twins finally sleep, sweaty, starfish, safer, Taya sits by the door of the studio she once thought was a museum and is now a room. Dr. Seema cleans brushes and says what only therapists get away with saying without being annoying. "You made a family policy," she says. "It will outlive this storm. So will the building," Taya says, eyes on a crack in the ceiling that got through the day and will get patched tomorrow. "And the whales," Dr. Seema adds. "Especially the whales." Downstairs, Altair's cousin Vendor gets an email at 12:17 from legal, terminated for cause. At 12:19, a different email goes out to all Kestrel staff. The board has adopted the staff dignity policy company-wide. No filming minors, no service narratives, no content in emergencies. A pilot for boring reflex training starts next week. Sign up link below. The link crashes in 10 minutes because too many people want to learn to be useful before cameras arrive. At 3:07 a.m., when the building finally exhales, Taya texts Cassian 3 words you don't send to your boss unless you've been through a storm together and seen him count with your song. "You did good." He replies with an unphotogenic emoji, and then, because he is learning to be a man and not a press release, he walks to the studio and says it out loud to the room where it matters. "We did good." The morning after is laundry and logistics, and the feeling after an argument that didn't break the house. Livia tapes a sign on the pantry fort, "Rescuers only." Leo adds beneath it, "Ask for permission for ladle." Price prints the sign on cardstock because elimination is next to godliness. Amara drafts a statement that is radical in one way. It says nothing beautiful. "We failed a roof," it reads. "We fixed it. We fired vendors. We will spend on maintenance more than marketing this quarter. Hold us to it." Soraya approves with a margin note shaped like a smile. And because finales love a staircase, not a single step, trouble knocks one more time dressed as family. A woman in a suit the color of grief and a man with a ring that looks like a gavel show up at the door with a letter from Rhea's parents, requesting visitation with conditions and questioning the influence of non-family caregivers. The words are polite, the weapon isn't. Cassian looks like someone picked a scab the size of a city. He says, "We'll negotiate," the way men say when they want a fight to be a meeting. Taya, who has watched grief turn into custody battles in waiting rooms where vending machines were the only witness, says what no one wants to hear. "We welcome love," she says, "but not control. If they want the kids to remember their mother, they'll come for whales, not for war." She is right. She is not done being right. The last part of this story is a long hallway with water stains drying in a courtroom that smells smells like pencils, and a studio where a sentence in blue paint decides a family's weather. There will be a microphone on a desk and a father who chooses slow over spectacle, an aunt who chooses humility over leverage, a judge who has time for commas, a house manager who signs her name on a policy she will enforce like a religion, and two small wolves who sit on a bench and refuse to be content for anyone. There will be a final trap and a last rescue and a kiss asked for or not at all. There will be soup, there will be whales, and when it's done there will be boring, the kind you earn. By Monday the building smells like wet drywall and second chances. The studio dries under fans, blue whales blink in the breeze. On the kitchen island sits a letter from Ria's parents, drafted by a lawyer who thinks ink can parent. They want structured visitation, a say in exposure to grief stimuli, and a prohibition on non-family caregivers directing access to the deceased's effects. It is polite like a trap. Cassian reads it twice, thumb on that last clause. Amara reads it once, says, "They'll file, which is family for Ward." Taya reads it and circles 3 words only: love, control, whales. Invite them Wednesday, she says. If they want the kids to remember their mother, they'll come for whales, not for war. Love shows, control writes memos. Cassian texts the grandparents, "Come Wednesday, no cameras, no consultants." They reply with a calendar invite and an attached article by Dr. Klein about closure. They file anyway. Family court Thursday. Taya preps the twins like she preps for storms. Court is a room for adults to practice inside voices. She tells them, "You're not evidence, you're children. You don't have to speak. If a grown-up asks you a question you don't want, you look at me or your dad and we'll say no." She stuffs a thermos of soup in a tote, adds headphones, a sketchbook, the scrap in Ria's handwriting. Whales don't swallow cities. They carry them, taped to cardstock like a passport. Leo ties a bowline around the tote handle because he trusts rope more than promises. Livia pockets a small paint chip the color of their mother's laugh.